Welcome to Rewild Your Business. I'm your host, Jill Mokes. Thank you so much for joining me again this week. This is the first of the 7 layers that I talked about in last week's episode. So before we get into it, if you didn't listen to episode 210, that episode is where I set out what I'm going to be going through in this 7-part series. And this episode is the first part. So this series, just to recap for you, this series is about how to identify in the right order what needs to be fixed in your business so that you can grow. So if you are someone whose business feels a bit stalled, who feels like you're doing all the things but nothing's really moving the needle, quite often what I find is that people take a little bit of a scattergun approach to trying to trace what the problem is and then actually taking the aligned action to make it work. And you know that I am a big fan of strategy and soul in your business. And just because we are building soul-led, purpose-filled businesses doesn't mean we can ignore the strategy part. So this series is about a really practical way that you can almost self-audit what's going on in your business so that you can take the right action at the right time. Okay, let's dive into the episode. Welcome to Rewild Your Business, the podcast for women doing the work their soul intended. I'm Jill Mokes. I'm an international business coach and I'm a guide for women doing the work that matters. Rewilding your business means cutting away what doesn't belong to allow what does to thrive, finding simplicity in your work. And it's about bringing the whole of who you are to the table, whether you're building something new or finding your way back to what really matters to you. I'm so glad you're here. So this is the first layer, and this is the first thing you're going to audit. So it's the first thing you're going to look at if something's not working in your business. And this first layer, I'm calling inner knowing. So this is all about your vision, your mindset, your intuition, right? It's the foundation beneath everything else. You can have the most beautifully designed brand. You can have like the most carefully crafted offers, a really consistent marketing strategy. But if this foundational layer is shaky, then nothing else is going to work the way you want it to, because it's all going to have been built on an unclear vision perhaps, or someone else's definition of success, someone else's version of what they wanted for their business that you've kind of absorbed as yours. So we always start here before anything else, before we look at anything to do with your brand, your marketing, your offers. If your business isn't working the way you want it to, look at this layer first. So I'm going to run through 4 signs that this inner knowing layer is where the problem is. And I want you to sit with each of them, with each of these 4 things. Try and sit with them and give each one of them time and space. So don't rush past and think, oh, that doesn't apply to me, right? Really sit with them and consider how clear you are, or how effective you are, or how trustful you are of all of these things. So the first one is you're not tuned in to your intuition, or perhaps you are, but you don't trust it. So I talk about this in lots of different ways. Sometimes I talk about listening to the call of your soul. Sometimes I talk about your inner voice, your inner knowing. But essentially what I'm talking about is your intuition. My friend Deb Driscoll, actually, who's probably listening to this on the beautiful beach in Tobago right now, she always says that our intuition, often people call it our 6th sense, But Deb always says, no, our intuition is our first sense. And I love that. That's always really landed with me. And I think it's absolutely true. Your intuition is always speaking to you. Always. And the question is, are you listening and do you trust it? And for so many of the women that I work with, and I include myself in this for years, not now, but for years I was this person. The person for whom the noise of the external world is so much louder than the signal of the inner world. So you've got maybe the algorithm is telling you to post more. You've got a coach or a mentor telling you you've got to niche down. Your industry is telling you this is how it's done. And yet somewhere underneath all of that, your soul is trying to tell you something different, but you've been just trained out of trusting it. And there are so many. I could include an entire podcast episode. I think I have actually in the past. If we go through, if I have, I'll link to it in the show notes. In fact, I know I've done episodes about intuition before. And there are so many reasons as women why we have been trained out underneath the patriarchy of trusting our intuition. And this episode isn't the one to go deep into that. But essentially what has happened is that we have learned to make all of our decisions from our head. And that often means making our decisions from a place of fear, from a place of what seems like logical, reasonable, and for the most part, safe. And then, of course, what happens is you're making decisions that on paper look right, but often don't feel right. I often tell the story of how my business only really shifted into the business I have now, the business I freaking love, when I made my soul the CEO of the business. And what I mean by that really is that I stopped making every single decision from a logical head perspective, and I started really tuning in to the voice of my soul, to my intuition. I started getting so much braver around trusting my intuition. And actually what started happening is that I started making better decisions. I was making stronger decisions, smarter decisions, and actually much more profitable decisions. So the moment I stopped overriding that inner knowing and started treating it like actually reliable data, things changed. The problem is, in a world that is so noisy, where we have content and noise coming at us from every direction, the problem is that our soul doesn't shout at us like that. It tends to whisper. So in the noise that we've got going on around us, that constant hum of what everyone else is doing, it can be really easy to miss the whispers of your intuition. But tuning into your intuition, I believe, is absolutely necessary for you as a business owner. It's necessary. It's not some kind of nice to have, airy-fairy practice, right? It's a necessary practice. And really rebuilding trust in yourself and learning how to tune in, how to hear what your soul is saying to you, what your intuition is telling you. And here's the important part, acting on that is some of the most important work that this layer, this inner knowing layer of your business is going to ask of you. So that's the first sign that this is where you need to start the work, where you need to start the audit work. So if you've listened to this section and thought to yourself, do you know what, Jo, I don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, I make strategic decisions for my business. You know, what are you talking about? Listening to your soul and your intuition, right? If that is something that feels like a complete disconnection for you, I really strongly urge you to start there and to start with just getting quiet. Start by taking all of the external input away and sitting in silence with yourself. If you have a question, if there's something that isn't feeling right in the business, or if your vision isn't clear, any of those things, sit down in silence and really listen to what your inner knowing is trying to tell you, because it will be talking to you. The second sign that this is the layer that needs work is if you don't really know what your purpose is. You've heard this all the time, right? Simon Sinek, start with why. Purpose was an absolute buzzword a few years ago. Things turn into buzzwords for a really good reason, usually, because they're important. And I want you to think about how clear you are around the work that you came here to do. Not the work that necessarily comes easily, not the stuff that makes sense given your CV, right? The work that when you imagine doing it every day for the rest of your working life, makes something in you go, yeah, absolutely, that is it. That is what I'm here to do. And I still think there are a lot of people out there who've never seriously asked themselves this question. They've probably read about it in the context of just consuming content on Instagram and stuff like that. But have you ever actually sat in silence, asked yourself the question and listened to what comes up? Again, our feminine energy of listening in that way has been overridden for so long by that masculine pull to be practical, to be realistic, to build your business around the skills you already have, the markets that already exist, problems that are already really well defined. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of that, but if you have never actually sat down and genuinely asked what you're being called to do, if you've never given that question the time and space that it deserves, then the foundation of your business isn't as secure as it could be. That's all I'm asking of you, is to ask yourself the question. And remember, it could be that you're going to sail through these 4 signs and say, do you know what? None of these apply to me, Jill. Just come on, bring on the next thing. But this podcast isn't going anywhere. All of these 7 episodes are going to be here for you to go back to as you run through your audit, because I have a sneaking suspicion that most people are going to have to do some work on this layer, this very, very first layer, before they go on to the next layer. So don't worry, you're still going to have the time to work through all of the episodes, all 7 episodes in the series. Don't skip this one. It's the most important part. Connected to knowing what your purpose is, of course, is really knowing what you want from your business. What do you really want? And I mean a vision that is so clear, so specific, so tangible. You can see it, you can hear it, you can touch it, you can practically taste it, right? The vision you have for your business, let's face one thing, building any business is not easy. Any business. So why would you ever build a business that isn't the fullest expression of what you want, what your purpose is, what the work you came here to do, right? That's one thing. And I will die on that hill. Building any business is hard. Don't ever compromise around the kind of business you're building. The vision you have for that business should produce an actual physical sensation in your body when you think about it. It should make you feel excited. It should make you feel like you're just longing to bring that to life. And it should have a touch of certainty to it, that this is my path. Because until you've got that clear vision, without that, you're kind of navigating by whatever wind blows the strongest on that day. So if you suddenly are seeing a competitor launch something, suddenly that's the greatest thing that you want to do. If you are spotting a trend that's got nothing to do with you, nothing to do with your business, you're still going to be vulnerable to chasing after it. But when you are super clear on your vision and you've put that stake in the ground and you know exactly what you are building, then you always know where you're going. And even if the path isn't straight, even if it takes you much longer than you thought it was going to, even when it gets really hard, you still know where you're going. You still know when you're taking micro steps in the right direction. And that's actually what building a business is. It's taking the small baby steps on the right path, not great big courageous leaps on the wrong path, right? Third sign that this is the layer that needs some work. And that is that fear is really driving the way you're running your business, the way you're building your business. And fear can show up in so many different ways. This is the mindset piece. We just talked just now about vision. This is the mindset piece. If you are allowing the fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of being too much or not enough or getting it wrong in public, then that is going to really show up in your business. It's going to mean that you are probably going to be playing safe. You're going to go generic. You're going to make yourself smaller and more palatable. And with that, you're going to become so easy to ignore. You're going to end up producing content that could have been written by absolutely anyone, probably AI. You're going to position yourself in a way that doesn't offend anyone, but also doesn't impact anyone, doesn't move anyone to take any action. That's when you become just forgettable. And it isn't because you're not good at what you do. That's the saddest thing. I see so many women who are freaking amazing at what they do. But because of the fear around those things that I just mentioned, fear of judgment, fear of failure, those are the two big ones, really. Everything else sits underneath those two. Because of that fear, because they're letting the fear dictate everything they do in their business, they've let fear convince them that the safest version of themselves is the one that's most likely to succeed. That's never true. Never. The safest version of you is the one that is most likely to be invisible. I think I suppose there's probably 3 areas that I see fear massively running the show in a lot of women's businesses. And I'm wondering actually if you'll perhaps recognize yourself in any of these. But the first one, and it's almost always the first one, and that is money. This runs so deep. Money mindset, particularly with women doing soul-led, really spiritually alive work, maybe the coaches, the guides. There is a huge persistent belief that wanting wealth, wanting to be wealthy, is in conflict with doing that meaningful work. So there's this feeling that if you're truly called to serve, you should be above the desire for the financial abundance. Oh, and it drives me so crazy because that belief is really keeping you trapped. It's keeping you operating at a fraction of your potential, at a fraction of the potential impact you could be having. So please don't deny a desire to make money from your business. It's not in conflict with your soul's calling. In many cases, it's part of that soul's calling, because when you make money, everyone wins. Second place I see this show up is visibility, and I think that's an obvious one really. If you've got a fear of judgment, you're going to really struggle to show up and be visible. And this can, if you're someone who catches yourself complaining internally to yourself, and saying, I'll never have as many followers as that person, or I'm so boring compared to that person, I've got nothing original enough to say. What's underneath all of those thoughts is a comparison that actually has nothing to do with you and everything to do with a story that you've decided to believe about what's required of you. Because visibility is never about volume. It's never about the number of followers. It's never about, the quantity of what you're putting out there. It's always about the resonance. Always. So what happens is, if you are scared of being visible, you'll make up that as an excuse. You'll make it be about volume. You'll make it be about consistency. You'll make it be some kind of practical problem. I just need a better strategy, a better system. But actually, it's just that you haven't made the decision yet to be visible. The decision that what you have to say is worth hearing. So that could be where your issue with fear is sitting and showing up. And then the third one is really around ambition. It's quite subtle, I think, this one. It's kind of this feeling that the really ambitious version or the ambitious level of success isn't available to someone like you. That it's reserved for some particular kind of person, someone, I don't know, more polished, more connected, more whatever. And it's almost like we feel like the women operating at that level, we think they've been given access to something that we weren't, right? But they weren't given access to anything that you haven't been given access to. They decided for themselves, and then they kept deciding over and over, even when it was hard, even when they didn't feel ready. The difference is they didn't set a bar at the level they thought was available for them. And that is where so many women go wrong. They allow all of the thoughts and beliefs that they have built up over the years, they allow them to feel like facts. And then they set that bar, that internal bar, that they think represents what's available for them. And they will never be able to push beyond that bar. But when you genuinely understand that there is no bar, that there is no limit other than what you impose on yourself, there is no limit other than the restrictions you place on yourself, that's when you can start asking the question, what would I do if there was nothing stopping me? So the fourth question, or the fourth area I want you to think about is, have you given yourself permission to grow the full fat version of your business? Not the light version, not the version that you have trimmed at the edges to make it feel a little bit more palatable, a little bit more realistic. Because one thing that I absolutely know for sure, and that is that until you give yourself permission to claim the vision that you want for your business, to actually live in accordance with the purpose, to allow yourself to say yes to the work that you're here to do, until you stop letting fear make your decisions, right? Until you overcome all of those things, then you are not giving yourself permission to build that full fat version. And I really want you to put back into your vision the parts that you took out because they felt too big or too bold or just too much. The bits that made you a bit nervous to admit out loud, they belong in the vision you have for your business. Your vision, it doesn't have to be comfortable. It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be true. So you've got to get to that absolute root of what you really want from your business. Because until you get to that alignment with your intuition, that gut feeling of what's right for you and what isn't right for you, isn't going to land. You are allowed to want what you actually want. You're allowed to want to do that work that feels too good to be truly possible. I feel like that about coaching. Honestly, I feel like getting paid to have incredible conversations with remarkable women is a too good to be true job. And that is my job. It's not too ambitious. It's not too specific. It's not too anything, right? You're allowed to want what you want. I honestly believe that answering the call of your soul is available to every single woman who is willing to get quiet enough to hear it and courageous enough to act on it. This isn't some kind of gift that some people are born with and others aren't. It's a capacity that every single one of us has. And every single one of us can develop a much deeper relationship with our intuition, with our inner voice, our inner knowing. And there's something else I want to just remind you of, which is that courage isn't a feeling. This is really important when we're thinking about this mindset piece. Courage isn't a feeling. It's a practice. It's a decision you make moment by moment to act in alignment with your vision, even when you're scared. even when you're frightened of failure, even when you're frightened of judgment. I actually have a mantra that I'm going to share with you. And this is something I genuinely use in my own business. I use this most days, actually. And I come back to this over and over again. And it's really simple. I choose to be a woman who is brave enough to take this risk in this moment. I choose to be a woman who is brave enough to take this risk in this moment. I hope that is useful for you. You know, if it is, grab it, write it down, put it on a post-it note, do whatever you need to do. This isn't about being brave in general. You don't have to identify as a super brave person in general, right? All that mantra is asking for you is just to be brave enough in this moment for this thing. And that's all courage ever needs to be. It only ever needs to be enough for the moment you're in. And like any muscle, courage grows the more you use it. The more you choose bravery in the small moments, the more available it is to you in the bigger things, the harder decisions. So every time you act in spite of the fear, you're literally building that capacity for courage. So in the show notes, there is a worksheet which has 10 journaling prompts to help you audit this layer properly. So this is, if you decide to commit with me on this journey for these full 7 episodes where we're going to go step by step through each aspect of your business, this is going to be a really game-changing process for you. So head to the show notes, download the worksheet with the 10 journaling prompts, and if you need to, print it out, whatever you need to do, make yourself a cuppa, but sit down and give it the time it deserves, right? And again, like I said, take your time here. There's just no rush to move on to the next layer. The podcast isn't going anywhere. Each episode is going to be ready for you when you're ready for it, right? And this layer is the foundation, this mindset piece. If you've been listening to this episode with that little voice inside, hopefully you're getting tuned into it. Hopefully you will go and sit in some silence and really listen to what comes up. Then you will know whether this is a place where you need to be spending some time. Okay? I also want to just share something else with you before we wrap up for today. When I really mastered my own money mindset and I stopped asking, how am I going to pay my mortgage? And I replaced it with, what is my soul actually calling me to do? What is the work that matters the most to me? That is when things changed. And they didn't change without fear. Trust me, they did not change without fear. There was fear. But there was also clear direction. Decision making became easier. And the work itself, the kind of women that I began working with, everything felt so much more like mine. And that's what this layer, this inner knowing layer, is all about. It's not about mindset hacks or manifestation rituals. It's not about any of those things. It's about getting really honest with yourself about whether you're building your business from your inner knowing, from your intuition, from what you feel inside is right for you, or whether you're building it from someone else's blueprint that was never meant for you. Okay, so next week we are going to go on to layer 2, which is all about the truest expression. So this is the brand work. Because honestly, once you know who you are and what you're here to do, once you've kind of done the mindset work and the vision work, then the question really becomes, are you showing up in your business as that person? Is the woman who needs you going to be able to recognize you and choose you as the right person for her or him? But anyway, we're not going to rush on to that one. Let's stay with this layer. First, do your audit, do your 10 journaling prompts, and let the questions do their work. That is the work, doing the journaling and looking at what comes up and then committing to the micro actions that are going to move you forward out of this layer. That is the work. Okay. All right, head to the show notes, download your worksheet, and I will see you back here again, same time, same place, next week. Bye for now.